The top tips to pass fast rather, minimal use of the text. So we've mentioned, that it's certainly necessary, I think, to have a text to refer to, but you just want to get the gist of the idea. So get the gist of the big ideas and then move on before you feel you're ready even to move on. And then it's really all about question practice that helps you, as Hugh said, to really identify your weaknesses. And it's a form of active learning. You've got to think, you've got to come up with the answers and generate the ideas yourself. And then I think, as we said before, it's all about being an active learner. Okay, so not becoming too comfortable and forcing yourself to retrieve information, to test yourself on it. So regular recall sessions, and it can be very informal. As I said, you finish a chapter, you finish a video, and you're just examining yourself for a couple of minutes, just trying to call up the main ideas, telling someone, talking to someone about them, or making notes yourself. And a very, very, very effective way of memorizing information is to teach someone else. Okay, so I would recommend finding CIMA study groups. There are lots of them on Facebook, or WhatsApp groups with CIMA students, and help your fellow students. It seems maybe at the start like you're sacrificing your time, but you're the one who's going to win in the end. If you are the person who's taking the lead there and teaching concepts to other students, you're going to really solidify that knowledge. So the next point then is to actually vary your sources. Don't rely on the text alone. Use a mix of things. So it's a blended approach to learning. So using video lectures, they can be through a tuition provider, but also there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. You mightn't get all of the videos there, but you're going to find some interesting information there, no doubt. Google is your friend as well. Mock exams, very, very important. Mock questions. The textbook has its role to play, no doubt about that. Newspapers, magazines, the Financial Times, the Economist, papers like that are really, really important. And, the real world of work, your own experience professionally. Try to think of ways you could actually apply the theories that you're coming across in CIMA to your job. We conducted a number of interviews with students in the last year or so, and you always learn something new from each and every student. They have a different take on, the best approach to learning, but there are lots of things that they have in common. And something that came up a couple of times was students were doing just that. They were taking the theories, which is, they tend to be dry, they tend to be, theoretical, divorced from reality, and trying to think how they could apply them to their own jobs. And they'd say that was very, very effective. Now, I didn't actually pay attention to this advice myself, because there was one period where I ran 2 exams at the same time. I think it was E3 and F3. But I would have kept more of my hair if I had studied them separately. So, I would definitely recommend taking one exam at a time, because you want to focus intensely on each and every paper. So, you're giving yourself 4 weeks or 5 weeks for a paper. You want to really just give all of your energy to that one paper and not try to kill yourself altogether by doing 2 at one time. And final piece of advice, and obviously you're going to say I would say this because, I run a tuition company, but I mean it when I say it. Don't go it alone, okay? Lean on one or numerous tuition providers. There are many options. Viva Financial Tuition is a fine option, obviously, but there are other options too. So definitely, I would say the self-study route it's long. It's
very tough.
It's tough, and it's quite boring, to be quite honest with you. I think we all fool ourselves into thinking we're smarter than we actually are. But when you have an experienced teacher, someone who's been through a qualification and has taught it 10 times, 20, 50 times, they know the stuff inside out, and they have a way of explaining in 30 minutes what would take you 5 hours to get through on your own, okay? It's much quicker, and it's also more fun. And it kind of keeps you honest as well. It keeps you on track. it structures your study, because typically with a tuition provider, they'll be working through a subject in a systematic way, and you have to fall in line with that system. So that's great. And, with the case study, it's very important that you get marking done, and, you need to get that done by someone who's marked many exams. So that's another reason. And, lean on other students. As I said, try to teach other students and learn from other students too. They're going through the same things. And one of the things that, while they're very useful, tuition providers sometimes fall into the trap, I think, of, because they're experts, they've forgotten what it's like to be a beginner. And a beginner has a kind of a way of understanding what other students are going through. And they have a way sometimes of explaining a difficult concept in their own words that maybe an expert doesn't. So very, very useful to tap into the knowledge of other students who are struggling to get through the qualification. Hugh, I don't know if you completely agree with all of those, or if there's anything you might add, or what.
No, I think that's really good. I see a lot of students on, particularly Facebook. There's lots of groups. People have WhatsApp groups. They talk to each other. They ask each other questions. I think that's a really good idea. When I was studying for my exam, I'll be honest and say I did all self-study. So I had pretty much 100% self-study, bar maybe a few practice mock papers and some practice questions here and there. I just looked at a study text and kind of worked it out, but it was a very long way of doing it. And, I had no one around me that was studying CIMA at all. So I think it's really important to talk to other students and see, can you help each other out? There was some things around, even just for an example, when I started off in CIMA, they had just introduced the case study style exams. So you're probably familiar, Thomas, it was a big change, because in CIMA previously there was just one case study and now there was 3. And no one had actually sat the operational case study paper when I went to do it. So it would have helped to have talked to someone, just to kind of get my nerves down. I had no feedback. So I think that's really important, because studying is tough. It's very, very tough. And it can be a lot easier if you have someone there as well to kind of talk to, and talk about maybe some of the issues you're having. Could be outside of studying issues, but, could be technical things, could be around the actual study day itself. How are you studying? What's your technique? I think it's really important that you talk to other students. And, I have seen as well, if there's someone in your workplace that is fully CIMA qualified, maybe ask them as well for some techniques or maybe some help. You really never know. It is important to try and draw up on all resources that you can kind of get, really. As Thomas says there, even just applying things to work, bring work into it a little bit. If there's people in a company that I worked in previously, they had this mentoring system where if you were fully qualified, you would mentor someone who's part qualified. There's nothing stopping you from doing that either online or doing that with someone in your workplace. And no, not everyone can do that, but if you can, I think that's a good idea. I think that's quite a good idea, but it'll depend on the person. In regard to things like getting feedback from marking, I think that's really important for the case study style exams. You have to get some feedback. I think it's very easy just look at the content and think, yes, I'm doing a great job. But until you get that feedback, I think you're maybe a little bit unsure of how good or bad your answers are, because there's a specific way to pass those papers and do well in them. And I think it really helps if you get some proper experienced feedback on your exam, from someone who's been there, so that would be my advice, just kind of relating to that.
Thanks a lot, Hugh. Just one thing, I think we've lost, some people have lost sound. So let me see. If you refresh the webinar, you should get the sound back. Yep. That's it. A few people are saying that. It sometimes happens. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Hugh. Very, very important that there's a community you can tap into. And I wish I'd understood that, sooner. Everyone's circumstances are different. you know, some of you will be working with colleagues who are doing CIMA, so you can talk and, you know, help each other out. That's fantastic. But many of you will be kind of isolated and not necessarily surrounded by other CIMA people. And in that case, you know, the internet is your friend then. You know,
definitely. Yeah.
There are, you know, Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, there are online tuition providers, and all of that stuff helps. Believe me, it does.